Now, you got to play and won a Super Bowl with Tom Brady. I've talked to you about that before and what you learned from him, but now all of a sudden he's potentially looking at buying, not potentially, they're in discussions to buy a minority percentage in the Raiders. And I know that you respect him greatly and highly and for all he did. As a player and then as a friend of Tom's, what do you think he could bring to a team as an owner?
I think friend is a loose term. I mean, I was with him for 6 weeks, but the perception that existed before I met him and then being around him for the most high pressure of situations in the Super Bowl, seeing all of these things, I think his demeanor and the one word that always comes to mind when people ask me about him is calculated. He always knows what's going on. He's very aware of the situation. He does everything meticulously. And that was what reaffirmed, I think, the notions that I had about him when I was with him, but he was also completely collaborative. He didn't know me. Obviously, he knew I went to Michigan State, and made some Brian Hoyer references and different things like that. So we know common denominators, or we know different people, and having been in the room with him, having been on the field and seeing him operate, it's extremely impressive because again, there's a lot of hard decisions that need to be made when you become a part of an ownership, I would imagine. I would love the opportunity. I don't know. But what he brings to the table is the same attributes that he brings to the locker room. And that's what you're looking for because that leadership component, that ability to find and see what's important and stick to a task is what an organization needs. And when you have that from a player's perspective, you have that continuity, you have that camaraderie, and the communication that goes along with it, nothing gets lost in translation. Organizations struggle when people assume different roles when they don't know what the level of expectation is. With Tom Brady, you always knew what your level of expectation was. And I got that very quickly from being there for 6 weeks.
We know what Irvin brought to the Dodgers, even though it isn't a basketball team, it's a baseball team. But Irvin once told me, Drew, you can't be great unless you're a good player who makes everybody around you better. He said greatness is not something an individual can do. It's when you're able to take those around you and make them better. I thought that was fascinating. And we see that he's done it with the Dodgers. Do you think a guy like Tom that was so detail oriented, so collaborative in an owner's box can bring those same types of things like Irvin did?
There's no question, right? And obviously, it's a little bit easier when it's the same sport, but you
Mm-hmm.
have that, everybody talks about the it factor. There is an aura that supersedes Tom Brady in this domain. And when he walks into a locker room, when he walks into a press conference, when he walks into an owner's box or wherever that may be, people know he's there. He sets the tone. And I mean, his pregame speech before we went out there to win the Super Bowl, everybody was fired up and it was so on point. It was so measured. It was so necessary that you could tell that we were going to walk out of that locker room and not look back. And we never felt like that game was ever in the balance because of his leadership, because his ability to galvanize an entire team and a roster to bring them together. And that's what he can do for an organization.